everyone, our new topic for today is health and disease. Under this topic, we will look at various subtopics relating to health and disease, and we will start off by looking at a definition of health and a definition of disease. And in this video, we will take a look at the classification of the different types of diseases found in organisms. And a disease may be transmissible or non-transmissible, and also categorized as infectious, physiological, deficiency, or a hereditary disease. So after we look at a definition of these words, we will then go into some examples of diseases that fall under these categories. We will look at the other topics in other videos. So let's start. While there may be microorganisms, also called microbes, that keeps an organism's body healthy, there are those that can cause disease, and there are quite a few of these microorganisms. Before we start looking at the types of diseases, let us define health and disease. The World Health Organization, that is the WHO, defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, which might be an impediment in the body or an unwellness of the body. This is our definition of health, and keep in mind it is a combination of physical, mental, and social well-being. Now, the absence of good health would indicate the presence of disease. So let's look at our definition of disease. It is said that a disease is a disorder or a condition which impairs the normal functioning of an organism, which can be identified or characterized by specific signs and symptoms. So each disease would have specific signs and symptoms, which is how it can be identified and then treated. Now, with our definition of health and disease, we can now look at the different types of diseases that an organism may develop. So let's look at a transmissible versus non-transmissible disease. If a disease is transmissible, it can be infectious or it can be communicated from one organism to another, and it is caused usually by a microorganism, versus a non-transmissible disease, which is said to be non-infectious or non-communicable, and we will look at different examples of both words so as to clarify the meaning. But for now, let's just look at our definitions. So let's look at an infectious disease, which is said to be communicated or communicable by a virus, bacteria, or fungi, and there are other microorganisms that can cause infectious diseases. So a transmissible disease can be an infectious one, and our non-transmissible diseases, which cannot be transmitted or carried by an infection from one person to the next, can be a physiological deficiency or hereditary disease, where a physiological disease of the body is due to some physical defect that a person may be born with or obtained during the course of their life, There's a deficiency disease which can be caused by a lack of nutrients in the diet. For example, lacking of vitamin A, B, C, etc. And then there are hereditary diseases which can be passed from one generation to the next through genes or genetic material, which is DNA. With an understanding of the different types of diseases that you have taken down in your notebook from this slide, let us look at examples of these diseases to clarify the meanings of the different words. There are transmissible diseases such as salmonellosis, cholera, malaria or dengue, hepatitis, AIDS, influenza, tuberculosis, also called TB, typhoid fever, and yellow fever. And then there are infectious diseases. And I have said before that a transmissible disease can also be infectious. So there may be a cross of some diseases here. So tuberculosis, chickenpox, common cold, gonorrhea, syphilis, hepatitis, AIDS, malaria, influenza, and ringworm. These are all infectious or transmissible diseases. So I've just placed them in two categories so that you can be aware that they are identified as both. So that's transmissible and or infectious diseases. Now let's look at our non-transmissible diseases, which can be categorized as physiological, deficiency, or hereditary. So for example, heart disease, which is non-transmissible, may be physiological or it may be hereditary, for example, hypertension. Stroke, which is a non-transmissible disease, is a physiological one. Cancer, which is non-transmissible, can be considered to be physiological as well as it may be hereditary in some cases. Asthma, which is non-transmissible, is considered to be physiological due to a defect in the body. Diabetes is considered to be a hereditary disease which can be passed on from generations before, and it can also be a physiological or lifestyle disease that a person may develop later on in life. Kidney disease, which is non-transmissible, may be considered to be a physiological disease. And there are others in here under physiological and hereditary, which I have not mentioned. So for example, under hereditary, there's one called hemophilia, cystic fibrosis, and Down syndrome. And last but not least, some deficiency diseases caused by a lack of a vitamin in the body would be beriberi, caused by a lack of vitamin B, scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, and rickets, caused by a lack of vitamin D. Now you have to take down the information from the slide as seen, and you are free to do a Google search if you are unsure about any of the diseases seen here for any extra information. So you're required to know these diseases and what category or classification they fall under. And this is the end of the first video in looking at a definition of health and disease and classification of diseases. Thank you for viewing.